I never imagined I'd end up in a feud with our neighborhood's most notorious HOA president. But here we are. My name's Daniel, and I've lived in Oakwood Estates for the past 3 years. It's your typical suburban neighborhood. Neatly trimmed lawns, identical-looking houses, and neighbors who mostly keep to themselves. That is, except for Karen Wilson. Karen is the self-declared queen of our homeowners association. From the moment I moved in, it was obvious that her interpretation of maintaining community standards took priority over things like common courtesy or personal boundaries. She's in her mid-50s, always sporting a perfectly styled blonde bob that somehow managed to look disapproving even before she spoke. Her car, a white Lexus SUV, has a custom license plate that proudly reads HOAPRZ, and every morning she patrols the neighborhood with a little notepad, jotting down every tiny violation she sees. From garbage bins left out a few hours too long to grass growing half an inch past regulation height. Nothing escapes her scrutiny. Most people in the neighborhood choose to just play along to avoid conflict. But for some reason, I became her favorite target. It started when I began working from home last year. I work in IT security, which means I rely on fast, stable internet. The existing service in the neighborhood was terrible, slow, spotty, and unreliable. So when a new fiber optic company started installing lines in the area, I jumped at the opportunity. I scheduled my installation for a Tuesday morning, took a few hours off work, and figured it would be a simple process. The technician showed up on time, walked me through the route for the underground cable, and got started. That's when Hurricane Karen hit. I was in the middle of a Zoom call when I heard her voice outside, sharp, rising, unmistakable. At first, I tried to ignore it, but then the technician knocked on my door with Karen right behind him. "Excuse me," she began, in that overly sweet voice she uses when she's about to lay down the law. "Are you aware that all exterior modifications to properties in Oakwood Estates must be pre-approved by the Architectural Committee?" The tech, his name was Mike, gave me a look that said he'd seen this kind of thing before. "It's just an internet cable," I replied calmly. "The company already has the permits from the city, and they're installing lines all over the neighborhood." I even showed her the paperwork. Thinking that would clear things up, big mistake. She snatched the documents from my hand and skimmed through them like a hawk. "These are city permits," she snapped, "not HOA approvals. According to Section 12, Paragraph 4 of our covenant, all exterior modifications, including utility installations, require written approval from the board. This is in direct violation of our bylaws." Her tone made it clear. She wasn't just enforcing the rules. She lived for them. I took a slow breath. Try and keep things civil. "Karen, I hear you, but this is a standard utility installation. The cables are going underground, and they won't be visible. Several of our neighbors are getting the same upgrade." Trying to reason with her, though, was like arguing with a brick wall. Or maybe a cat knocking things off a counter. Calculated and completely indifferent. "I'll need an application submitted by Monday," she said, folding her arms. "And all work must stop immediately until the board has reviewed your request, which won't be until our next meeting in 3 weeks. She gave me a tight, satisfied nod as the technician checked his watch, clearly not thrilled about the sudden delay. The technician stood there, clearly debating whether to pack up and move on to the next house on his route. "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "I've already taken time off work for this. The company has all the permits required by law. The HOA doesn't have authority over utility services." I could feel my patience starting to fray, and from the way Karen's face flushed red, I could tell I had struck a nerve. She did not like having her authority questioned. "As president of this association," she snapped, dropping her fake smile, "I absolutely do have jurisdiction over the aesthetic standards of this community. If you proceed without board approval, you'll be fined $500, with additional penalties for each day it remains installed." Then she spun around and marched back to her white Lexus, already dialing her phone. I had no doubt she was contacting her board allies, building her case against me. To his credit, the technician finished what he could outside before politely saying he'd return once I got things sorted with the HOA. The moment he left, I dove into research mode. I spent hours reading through local ordinances, utility laws, and HOA regulations. As it turned out, while the HOA could enforce plenty of rules, paint colors, fencing, lawn height, they had no legal grounds to interfere with government-authorized utility installations. I drafted a clear, respectful email to the entire HOA board, citing specific laws and local precedent. I sent it that evening. I also reached out to a few neighbors who had recently gotten fiber installed, hoping to find out whether Karen had harassed them too. By morning, a few neighbors replied, supportive, sympathetic, and just as fed up with Karen's antics. But from the HOA board, radio silence. I had to head into the city for a work meeting that day, so I left early, planning to deal with it all when I got back. What I didn't know was that while I was away, Karen had escalated from annoying to outright criminal. I got home around 3 p.m. and went to check the side of the house where the cable had been run. What I found stopped me cold. The fiber optic line had been sliced multiple times. Not a clean break, but several rough, uneven cuts. This wasn't an accident. It had been done on purpose. And whoever did it had taken their time. I was furious. This had gone way beyond HOA drama. This was destruction of property. I immediately called the internet provider to report the damage. They were just as shocked and promised to send someone out. While I waited, I remembered the security cameras I'd installed shortly after moving in, just in case. In an HOA neighborhood, a little extra surveillance seemed like smart insurance. I pulled up the footage and scanned through the morning's recordings. Then I saw her. There, in clear high-definition video, was Karen Wilson. At exactly 10:15 a.m., she walked along the side of my house, garden shears in hand. She looked around, glanced over her shoulder, and then crouched down, methodically cutting the cable in multiple places. When she was done, she stood up, calmly tucked the shears into her oversized designer handbag, and walked off, wearing a satisfied smirk like she just won a game. I stared at the screen, stunned. I watched it again, then a third time. This wasn't misunderstanding or some passive-aggressive stunt. This was calculated, and it was a crime. Cutting a fiber optic cable isn't just vandalism. It can qualify as criminal tampering with telecommunications infrastructure. In some cases, it's even considered a federal offense. I made several backup copies of the footage and called the local police non-emergency line. Once I explained what had happened, and that I had the whole thing on video, the dispatcher said an officer would be dispatched shortly. About 30 minutes later, Officer Rodriguez arrived. He was calm, respectful, and took things seriously. When I showed him the footage, he didn't hesitate. "This is definitely criminal damage," he said. "Depending on how the internet provider files their report, it could escalate further." Officer Rodriguez explained that depending on the value of the damaged equipment and the disruption to services, the charges could escalate to a felony. Telecommunications infrastructure is protected under several federal and state statutes, he said, making careful notes. "Do you have any idea why she would do this?" I gave him a concise rundown of my ongoing issues with Karen and the HOA, including the email I'd sent to the board. He shook his head. "We get a lot of neighbor disputes," he said, "but this is something else. Cutting utility lines? That's criminal." He took my formal statement, collected a copy of the video, and promised to keep me informed. About 20 minutes after Officer Rodriguez left, the internet technician arrived to assess the damage. The moment he saw the line, his jaw tightened. "Wow," he muttered, crouching to inspect the fiber. "This wasn't an accident, and this isn't cheap to fix." He explained that unlike copper wiring, fiber optic cable couldn't simply be spliced. It would need a full replacement. He estimated the repair would cost over $2,000, not including labor or the service interruption. He took photos for their internal records and noted that their legal team would likely be contacting me and possibly pursuing damages on their own. I was working off my phone's hotspot about an hour later when I heard a noise outside. Curious, I walked to the window. There, in Karen Wilson's driveway, stood Officer Rodriguez, calm and professional. Karen, however, was another story, red-faced and flailing her arms in the air. Even with the windows closed, I could make out her sharp voice. "This is absurd. I'm the HOA president. I was enforcing our community standards." Rodriguez remained composed, showing her something on his tablet, which I assumed was the video evidence. The change in her demeanor was immediate. Outrage gave way to panic. Then came the moment I never thought I'd witness. She was read her rights and placed in handcuffs in broad daylight, right in front of her manicured flower beds. Several neighbors stood outside, suddenly interested in checking the mail or watering their lawns, though we all knew what they were really there for. As Officer Rodriguez guided Karen toward the patrol car, she turned and locked eyes with me. Her expression, pure loathing with just a flicker of disbelief, was something I won't forget. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Over the next few days, I gave follow-up statements to both the police and the internet company's legal department. Karen was formally charged with criminal damage to property, with the possibility of additional federal charges due to the nature of the equipment she damaged. She was released on bail later that day. I expected some kind of retaliation, but it never came. Apparently, even Karen knew better than to stir up more trouble while facing real legal consequences. The internet company fast-tracked the repair. Not only did they waive all fees, but they also gave me 6 months of free service as a goodwill gesture. They confirmed they'd be pursuing full restitution from Karen. Meanwhile, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. According to a neighbor who attended, it was brief and decisive. Karen's actions were unanimously condemned. The vice president, Jim, a retired attorney, took over as acting president. To his credit, he came by in person to apologize for the unfortunate incident and assured me that the HOA would not be taking any action regarding my installation. The best part came 3 weeks later. A formal notice from the board arrived in my mailbox. Karen Wilson had been removed from her position as president and permanently banned from holding any HOA office again. It was the first time in Oakwood Estates history that such a ban had been issued. The letter also mentioned she was now facing over $10,000 in legal fees, restitution payments, and potential civil penalties, both from the internet provider and the city itself. That evening, as I collected my mail, Karen pulled into her driveway. She didn't get out of the car right away. She just sat there, staring at a piece of paper in her lap. I could see it was the same letter I had received. When she finally looked up and saw me, her mouth opened as if to say something, but nothing came out. For the first time since I had moved in, Karen Wilson had absolutely nothing to say, and it was glorious.